They said she was insane for walking into that blizzard. They would say worse when they found out what she brought back. Kaia Thornridge didn't know she was about to change the fate of an entire species. She only knew 3 wolf pups were dying in the snow, and no one else was coming to save them. So she did something reckless, something that would shatter her quiet life, expose a hidden legacy, and drag her into the savage secret world of the Iron Ridge Pack, a place where outsiders don't survive, and trust is paid in blood. But the alpha waiting behind those gates wasn't expecting her, and neither of them was ready for what she truly was. If you want to see how a woman with no pack, no training, and no idea what she really is manages to bring the most feared wolves in Montana to their knees, stick with me to the end. Hit that like button, drop your city in the comments, and let's dive into a story of survival, power, and the bond that no one saw coming. The wind was a living thing. It howled through the pines like something wounded, ripping branches from their trunks and hurling frozen debris across the mountainside. Snow fell in thick, blinding curtains, erasing the world beyond 10 feet. The temperature had dropped to 15 below zero an hour ago. Now it was colder, deadly cold. Kaia Thornridge should have been inside. Instead, she stood waist-deep in a snowdrift, her breath coming in sharp, visible bursts, her gloved fingers aching as she gripped the handle of her emergency pack. The storm had hit fast, faster than the weather reports had predicted, and she'd barely made it back from her supply run to the old logging trail before the road disappeared entirely. Her cabin was 300 yards east, close enough to survive, far enough to kill her if she lost her bearings. But she wasn't moving, because she'd heard something, a sound that didn't belong to the wind. Thin, desperate, almost crying. Kaia turned her head, squinting through the blizzard. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction, a maze of white and shadow. She strained to listen, her heart thudding against her ribs. There. Again. A high-pitched whimper, barely audible over the roar of the storm. Her instincts screamed at her to keep walking, to get to shelter, to survive. But her feet didn't move toward the cabin. They moved toward the sound. Stupid, she muttered under her breath, stumbling forward through the drifts. This is how people die, Kaia. This is exactly how people die. But she kept going. The whimpering grew louder, closer, and then she saw them. Huddled beneath the overhang of a fallen spruce, 3 small shapes trembled against the snow. Their fur was matted and dark with ice. Their eyes, amber and glassy, stared up at her with a desperation that punched the air from her lungs. Wolf pups. No more than 8 weeks old, alone, dying. "Oh no," Kaia whispered, dropping to her knees. "No, no, no! Where's your mother?" She scanned the area, searching for tracks, for a den, for anything. But the storm had erased everything. There was no sign of the pack, no scent trail, no adult wolves circling back to protect their young. These pups had been abandoned, or worse, left behind when their mother was killed. The smallest one let out a faint whine, its body shaking violently. Hypothermia. They were all hypothermic. If she didn't act now, they'd be dead within the hour. Kaia shrugged off her pack and yanked it open, pulling out the thermal blanket she kept for emergencies. She wrapped the first pup carefully, tucking it against her chest inside her coat. It was so small, so fragile. Its heartbeat fluttered weakly against her ribs. "You're okay," she whispered, though she had no idea if that was true. "You're going to be okay." She grabbed the second pup, a little bigger, slightly stronger, and bundled it into the blanket alongside the first. The third pup, the weakest, barely moved when she lifted it. Its breathing was shallow, erratic. "Stay with me," Kaia said firmly, zipping her coat shut over all 3 of them. "Just stay with me." Then she stood, turned east, and ran. Yeah, the cabin was a blur of motion and desperation. Kaia kicked the door open, stumbled inside, and immediately laid the pups on the rug in front of the fireplace. She grabbed kindling, newspaper, matches, her hands shaking so badly she could barely strike the flint. The fire caught. She fed it until the flames roared. Then she turned back to the pups. The first 2 were shivering, their eyes half open. The third, the smallest, lay completely still. "No," Kaia said, her voice cracking. "No, you don't get to do that. Not now. Not after I dragged you all the way here." She scooped the pup into her hands and held it close to the fire, rubbing its tiny chest with her thumbs. "Come on, come on." Nothing. Panic surged through her. Without thinking, she pressed her palm flat against the pup's ribcage and willed it to breathe. Live. Please, just live. And then a flutter, faint, barely there, but real. The pup's chest rose, fell, rose again. Kaia gasped, tears streaking down her face. That's it. That's it, little one. Stay with me. She didn't know what she'd just done. She didn't care. All that mattered was that it had worked. For 3 days, Kaia didn't sleep. She fed the pups every 2 hours with a makeshift bottle she'd rigged from a medicine dropper and goat's milk. She kept the fire burning. She monitored their temperatures, their breathing, their heartbeats. She cleaned them, warmed them, whispered to them in the dark. And slowly, miraculously, they started to recover. The biggest pup, the one with the dark stripe down its spine, was the first to gain strength. Kaia named him Shadow. He was bold, curious, already trying to gnaw on her fingers. The second, smaller and quieter, stayed close to her side. She called her Ember for the golden flecks in her gray fur. The third, the one who'd nearly died, was still weak. But she was fighting. Kaia named her Frost. On the fourth morning, Kaia sat on the floor with all 3 pups curled in her lap and realized something that made her stomach twist. She couldn't keep them. They weren't dogs. They were wolves. Wild animals. And as much as she wanted to believe she could raise them, give them a life here in the cabin, she knew the truth. They belonged to a pack. And somewhere out there, that pack was looking for them. Or mourning them. Kaia had heard the stories. Everyone in this part of Montana had. The Iron Ridge Pack, a reclusive, dangerous group that lived deep in the northern wilderness. Some said they were survivalists. Others said they were a cult. A few whispered darker things that sounded like fairy tales. But Kaia had seen their territory markers. The claw marks on trees, the boundaries no hunter dared cross. If these pups came from Iron Ridge, their pack would want them back. And if she didn't return them soon, they'd come looking. The decision was made. 2 days later, Kaia loaded the pups into a padded crate in the back of her truck, wrapped them in blankets, and started the long, winding drive north. The road to Iron Ridge wasn't marked on any map, but Kaia had lived in these mountains long enough to know where the warnings began. She saw the first sign 10 miles in, private property, no trespassing. Then another, turn back. And finally, painted in red on a massive boulder, last warning. Kaia's hands tightened on the wheel. Too late to turn back now, she muttered. The pups whimpered softly from the crate behind her. She kept driving. The forest grew denser, darker. The trees here were ancient, their trunks thick as houses, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the sky. The air itself felt heavier, charged with something Kaia couldn't name. And then she saw it. The gate. 15 feet tall, made of steel and iron, reinforced with thick beams. Cameras mounted on either side. Motion sensors. Razor wire coiled along the top. This wasn't a survivalist compound. This was a fortress. Kaia stopped the truck 20 feet from the gate and killed the engine. For a long moment, she just sat there, her pulse hammering in her ears. Then she opened the door and stepped out. The cold hit her immediately. Sharper here, more hostile. She walked to the back of the truck, opened the crate, and carefully lifted out the smallest pup, Frost. The pup nuzzled into her neck, trusting. Kaia's throat tightened. Then she turned and walked toward the gate. The cameras tracked her. She stopped 10 feet away and raised her voice. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she called out. "I found 3 wolf pups in a blizzard 4 days ago. They were dying. I kept them alive. I think they're yours." Silence. Then, a voice, male, deep, cold as the winter air. "Step back from the gate." Kaia's breath caught. She didn't move. "I'm not leaving them out here to freeze again," she said firmly. "If you want them back, open the gate." Another pause. Longer this time. And then with a mechanical groan, the gate began to open. Kaia's heart slammed against her ribs. Beyond the gate, figures emerged from the shadows. Tall, broad, moving with a predator's grace, and at the center of them all, a man. No, not a man. An alpha. Kaia knew it the instant she saw him. The way the others deferred. The way the air itself seemed to shift in his presence. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes that burned like molten gold. His face was all sharp angles and harsh lines, his jaw clenched tight. He wore black, head to toe, and moved with the kind of lethal precision that made Kaia's instincts scream. Danger. Run. But she didn't. He stopped 5 feet from her and stared, not at her, at the pup in her arms. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something raw and broken and furious all at once. When he spoke, his voice was a low rasp. "Where did you find her?" Kaia swallowed. "East Ridge, near the old logging trail. There were 3 of them, abandoned. They weren't abandoned." The words were a growl. Kaia flinched. The man took a step closer. "Their mother was killed 3 weeks ago," he said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "Hunters. We searched for days. We thought the pups were dead." Kaia's chest ached. "They almost were," she said quietly. "But they're alive now, and they're strong. I made sure of it." The man's gaze snapped to hers. For the first time, he truly looked at her, and Kaia felt the weight of that stare like a physical force. He studied her face, her eyes, the way she held the pup. Then he stepped back and gestured to the others. "Bring them inside." Kaia hesitated. "All of you," the man added, his tone brooking no argument. "Now!" And before she could protest, 2 of the others moved forward, flanking her, guiding her through the gate. The gate slammed shut behind her, and Kaia Thornridge stepped into a world she didn't understand, a world that would never let her leave. Inside the compound, Kaia's senses were overwhelmed. The place was massive, a sprawling network of cabins, longhouses, and stone structures built into the side of the mountain itself. Smoke rose from chimneys, fires burned in outdoor pits. People moved with purpose, men and women, young and old, all of them watching her with expressions that ranged from suspicion to outright hostility. Kaia kept her head down and focused on the pup in her arms. The Alpha led her to a large central building, what looked like a meeting hall. Inside, the air was warm. A fire roared in a stone hearth. Furs and pelts lined the walls. "Set her down," the Alpha said, pointing to a large cushion near the fire. Kaia knelt and gently placed Frost on the cushion. The pup whimpered, her tiny paws scrabbling for purchase. Kaia stroked her head. "You're safe now." The Alpha crouched beside her. Up close, he was even more intimidating. His presence filled the room, but when he reached out to touch the pup, his hand was gentle, reverent. "Frost," he murmured. "We named her Frost." Kaia blinked. I called her that too." The Alpha's eyes cut to hers. For a heartbeat, they just stared at each other. Then he stood abruptly and turned to one of the others, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair. "Bring the other 2 inside and get Marin. I want them examined immediately." The woman nodded and left. The Alpha turned back to Kaia. "You kept them alive for 4 days." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Kaia said. "How?" She hesitated. "I just did what I had to." "That's not an answer." Kaia's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you want me to say. They were dying. I didn't let them die." The Alpha's expression darkened. "You're human." Again, not a question. Kaia frowned. "Yes." "And yet you walked into a blizzard, found 3 wolf pups, kept them alive, and brought them here? To a place every human in this region knows to avoid." Kaia's pulse quickened. "I didn't know where else to take them." "Bullshit!" The word was flat, final. Kaia's temper flared. "Excuse me?" The Alpha stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You didn't stumble onto those pups by accident. You didn't survive that storm by luck. And you sure as hell didn't bring them here without knowing exactly what you were walking into." Kaia's breath hitched. "So I'll ask you one more time," the Alpha said, his golden eyes burning into hers. "Who sent you?" Kaia stared at him and realized he thought she was a threat, a spy, an enemy. "No one sent me," she said, her voice shaking. "I came here because I thought you'd want your pups back. That's it. That's the only reason." The Alpha didn't move, didn't blink. And then, a voice from the doorway. "Darian!" The alpha turned. An older man stepped into the room. He was shorter, grayer, but his eyes held the same intensity. "Let her breathe," the man said quietly. "The pups are here. They're alive. That's what matters." Darian, the alpha, didn't respond. The older man walked over to Kaia and offered her a small, tired smile. "I'm Corvin," he said, "second of this pack, and I apologize for Darian's suspicion. We've had a difficult few weeks." Kaia nodded slowly. "I understand." Corvin glanced at the pup on the cushion. His expression softened. "You saved them." "I tried," Kaia said. "You did more than try." Corvin looked back at her. "What's your name?" "Kaia. Kaia Thornridge." Corvin's eyes widened, just slightly, but enough. "Thornridge," he repeated slowly. Kaia frowned. "Yes. Why?" Corvin exchanged a look with Darian. Darian's jaw clenched. "Where's your family from?" Corvin asked carefully. "I don't have family," Kaia said. "I was raised by my grandmother. She died 2 years ago. And before that?" Kaia hesitated. "I don't know. My grandmother never talked about it." Corvin's expression shifted, something like recognition or realization. "Did she leave you anything?" he asked. "A letter? A journal? Anything?" Kaia's hand instinctively went to the pendant around her neck, a small silver wolf's head, etched with symbols she'd never understood. Corvin's gaze locked onto it. "Where did you get that?" "My grandmother," Kaia said quietly. "She told me to keep it safe, that it was important." Corvin's face went pale. Darian stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the pendant. "Take it off," he said, his voice tight. Kaia's hand closed protectively over the pendant. "No." "Take it off." "Why?" Darian's eyes flashed. "Because that symbol belongs to the Thornridge bloodline," he said slowly. "And the last Thornridge Omega died 30 years ago." The room went silent. Kaia's heart stopped. "What?" she whispered. Corvin exhaled slowly. "Kaia," he said gently, "you're not just human." Kaia's world tilted. "You're one of us." And before she could process those words, the pup on the cushion let out a sharp, pained whimper. Kaia spun around. Frost was convulsing. "No!" Kaia dropped to her knees, reaching for the pup. Darian moved faster. He scooped Frost into his arms, his face carved from stone. "Marin!" he roared. "Now!" A woman burst into the room, tall, sharp-eyed, carrying a leather bag. "What happened?" she demanded. "She's seizing," Darian said, his voice cracking. "Do something." Marin knelt beside him, pulling out vials, instruments. "Hold her steady." But Frost's convulsions worsened. Her breathing stopped. Kaia's vision blurred. Without thinking, she lunged forward and pressed both hands to Frost's tiny chest. "Kaia, don't—" Corvin started. But it was too late. Heat surged through Kaia's palms, not physical heat, something deeper, something ancient. And then light, soft, silver, pouring from Kaia's hands into the pup's body. Frost gasped. Her eyes flew open. Her chest rose. And the convulsions stopped. Silence. Marin stared. Corvin's mouth fell open. Darian's expression was unreadable. Kaia yanked her hands back, her entire body shaking. What was that?" she whispered. No one answered, because they all knew. Kaia Thornridge wasn't just one of them. She was an Omega, the first in a generation. And everything had just changed. The silence that followed was suffocating. Kaia knelt on the stone floor, her hands still trembling, staring at Frost's small chest as it rose and fell in steady, healthy breaths. The silver light that had poured from her palms moments ago was gone, but the heat lingered, a phantom warmth that made her skin prickle and her heart race like she'd just run a marathon. She didn't understand what had just happened. She didn't understand any of this. Marin was the first to move. The healer leaned forward, her sharp eyes scanning Frost's body with clinical precision. She pressed 2 fingers to the pup's throat, checking her pulse. Then she lifted one of Frost's eyelids, examined her gums, her breathing, the temperature of her nose. Every movement was methodical, practiced, but Kaia could see the tension in the woman's shoulders. the disbelief in the tight line of her mouth. Finally, Marin sat back on her heels and exhaled slowly. "She's stable," Marin said, her voice tight. "Heart rate's normal, breathing's clear, temperature's back up. Whatever you did..." She looked at Kaia, her expression unreadable, caught somewhere between awe and suspicion. "It worked." Kaia's throat closed. "I didn't do anything," she whispered, pulling her hands back and cradling them against her chest. They still tingled, still felt hot. I don't know what that was. I swear I don't..." "You healed her," Corvin said quietly from behind her. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a gravity that made Kaia's stomach twist. "With touch, with intent. That's Omega ability, Kaia. Rare, powerful, and unmistakable." Kaia shook her head violently, her pulse racing. "That's not possible. I can't be..." "You are." Darian's voice cut through the room like a blade. Kaia looked up. The Alpha stood over her, his golden eyes burning with an intensity that made her stomach twist. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. He looked furious, shaken, and something else she couldn't name, something raw and dangerous and barely restrained. "The pendant," he said, his voice low and controlled. "The bloodline. The way the pups respond to you. And now this." He gestured sharply at Frost, his hand trembling slightly before he pulled it back and clenched it into a fist. "You're an Omega, Kaia Thornridge, whether you believe it or not." "I'm human," Kaia shot back, her voice shaking. She pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the way her legs wobbled beneath her. "I've always been human. I grew up in a cabin with my grandmother. I track deer. I chop firewood. I don't glow or heal things or whatever the hell you think I am." "Do you feel it?" Darian interrupted, stepping closer. Too close. Close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes, the way his pupils had narrowed to predator slits. The pull. The connection. When you touch them, when you're near them. Do you feel something shift inside you? Kaia opened her mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because she did feel it. She'd felt it from the moment she'd found the pups in the snow. A strange magnetic pull that had nothing to do with pity or compassion, something deeper, instinctive, like a part of her had recognized them before her mind could catch up, like her body had known what to do even when her brain was screaming at her to run, to leave them, to save herself. And when she'd held Frost just now, when the pup had been dying, she'd known what to do, not consciously, not logically, but somewhere deep inside her body had understood, had reached for something ancient and primal and right. Darian saw the realization flicker across her face. His expression hardened. "You're not leaving this compound," he said flatly. "Not until we understand what you are and what you want." Kaia's breath hitched. "I don't want anything. I brought your pups back. That's it. I'm done. I should be back at my cabin right now, not standing here being interrogated like I'm some kind of criminal." "No!" Darian's voice was iron, final. "You're not." Kaia pushed to her feet, anger flaring hot in her chest. "You don't get to keep me here. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for any of this. I saved your pups. You should be thanking me, not threatening me. And we didn't ask for you to show up at our gate with abilities you don't understand and a bloodline that disappeared 30 years ago," Darian snapped, his control finally cracking. His voice rose, sharp and fierce. "But here we are. So forgive me if I'm not ready to throw you a parade and send you on your way." "Darian," Corvin started, his tone warning. "No." Darian turned on him, his eyes blazing. "We just lost Elena. The pups were supposed to die. The pack is hanging by a thread. Wolves are leaving. Others are turning feral. We've had 2 challenges to my authority in the last week alone. And now this stranger walks in, claims she's human, and heals one of them with Omega Light?" His voice cracked, raw with grief and fury. "Tell me, Corvin, what would you do?" Corvin's face softened. He stepped forward, placing a hand on Darian's shoulder. "I would ask questions, not make threats. And I would remember that she didn't have to come here at all." Darian's jaw clenched. He shook off Corvin's hand and turned back to Kaia, and for a moment the rage in his eyes flickered into something raw, something grief-stricken and desperate. 3 weeks ago," he said quietly, each word deliberate and heavy, "my sister was killed by hunters. Elena. She was the pack's omega, the heart of everything we are. She was carrying medical supplies to a neighboring pack, trying to help them through a sickness outbreak, when they ambushed her on the road. Silver bullets. They didn't just kill her, they destroyed her. We found her body 2 days later, dumped in a ravine like garbage, and her pups were gone. Kaia's anger drained like water through a sieve. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her throat tight. Darian's expression didn't change. Elena held this pack together. Without her, the balance broke. Wolves started fighting over territory, over rank, over things that never mattered before. Alliances fractured. Old grudges resurfaced. We've lost 4 members in the last 2 weeks alone. Some left for other packs. Some turned feral and had to be put down. And the rest? He exhaled sharply, the sound ragged. The rest are barely holding on. We're one bad day away from tearing ourselves apart. Kaia's chest ached. She could see it now, the exhaustion in his face, the weight pressing down on his shoulders. This wasn't just an alpha protecting his territory. This was a man watching his family disintegrate and having no idea how to stop it. "So yes," Darian continued, his voice hard again, the walls slamming back into place. "You're staying, because if you really are what we think you are, then you might be the only thing keeping this pack from collapsing completely. And I'm not letting that chance walk out my gate because you're scared." Kaia stared at him, her pulse pounding in her ears, and realized with a sinking feeling, she wasn't a guest, she was a prisoner. They gave her a room, or rather they locked her in one. It was on the 2nd floor of a smaller building near the edge of the compound, close enough to be monitored, far enough to be isolated. The room itself was surprisingly comfortable. A bed with thick blankets, a wooden table and 2 chairs, a stone fireplace already burning, filling the space with warmth. The window was large, offering a view of the mountains beyond, but when Kaia tested it, she found iron bars embedded in the frame, subtle, almost decorative, but unmistakable. The door was heavy oak, reinforced with steel bands. When Corvin closed it behind her, she heard the lock click with a finality that made her stomach turn. Kaia stood in the center of the room, her hands still shaking, and tried to process everything that had just happened. Omega. Bloodline. Healing. Silver light pouring from her palms like something out of a fever dream. None of it made sense. She'd spent her entire life alone. Quiet. Unremarkable. Her grandmother had raised her in a cabin on the edge of nowhere, teaching her to track, to hunt, to survive the brutal Montana winters. But she'd never mentioned wolves, never mentioned packs or omegas or bloodlines or any of this supernatural insanity. So why had she left Kaia the pendant? And why had she never explained what it meant? Kaia sank onto the edge of the bed and pulled the pendant from beneath her shirt. The silver wolf's head gleamed in the firelight, its etched symbols sharp and precise. She'd worn it every day since her grandmother's death 2 years ago, but she'd never really looked at it, never questioned where it came from or what the symbols meant. Now she traced them with her fingertips, circles, lines, shapes that almost looked like letters but weren't quite. Ancient, deliberate. A knock at the door made her jump. "It's Corvin!" a voice called. "I'm coming in." The lock clicked. The door opened. Corvin stepped inside, carrying a wooden tray laden with food, bread, cheese, dried meat, a steaming bowl of soup. He set it on the table and gestured for her to sit. "You need to eat," he said gently. "You used a lot of energy tonight, more than you realize." Kaia didn't move. She stayed on the bed, clutching the pendant. Corvin sighed and sat down across from her, his movements slow and deliberate, non-threatening. "I know you're angry, and I know you're scared, but Darian's not wrong, Kaia. You're an Omega, and if you don't learn to control what you are, it's going to get you killed. Or worse, it's going to hurt someone you care about." Kaia's throat tightened. "I don't know how to control something I didn't even know I had. Until tonight, I thought I was just me, just Kaia, a woman who lives alone and keeps to herself." "That's why we're keeping you here," Corvin said patiently. "To teach you, to protect you, to help you understand what you're capable of before it consumes you. By locking me in a room? By keeping you safe from wolves who might see you as a threat or a tool." Corvin's expression darkened. "Not everyone in this pack is going to welcome you, Kaia. Some will see you as hope, a miracle that might save us. Others will see you as a replacement for Elena, and they'll resent you for it. And a few—" he paused, choosing his words carefully. "A few will see you as something to control, to use for their own purposes." Kaia's stomach twisted. "And Darian? What does he see me as?" Corvin was quiet for a long moment. He studied her face as if weighing how much truth she could handle. "Right now," he said finally, "he sees you as a question he doesn't have an answer to, and that terrifies him, because Darian has spent his entire life being the one with answers, the one who fixes things, the one who protects his people. And when Elena died, when he couldn't save her," Corvin's voice softened, "it broke something in him. So now you show up, out of nowhere, with power you don't understand, and a connection to a bloodline we thought was extinct. And he doesn't know if you're salvation or destruction, so he's holding on tight until he figures it out." Kaia looked down at her hands. They looked normal now, ordinary, but she could still feel the ghost of that heat, that power. "What if I can't control it?" she whispered. "Then we'll deal with it," Corvin said firmly. "Together. But you have to try, Kaia. You have to let us help you." He stood, brushing off his jeans. "Eat, rest. Tomorrow we'll start figuring out what you can do, and what you can't." He left. The lock clicked again, and Kaia was alone with her thoughts and a tray of food she had no appetite for. She didn't sleep. How could she? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the silver light pouring from her hands, felt the heat surging through her veins like molten metal, heard Frost's gasping breath as life flooded back into her small, fragile body. It should have been impossible, but it had happened, and now Kaia couldn't stop thinking about the other times. The moments in her life when things had happened that she couldn't explain. Things she'd dismissed as luck or coincidence. The injured hawk she had found as a child, dying, its wing shattered, that she'd wrapped in an old shirt and kept in a box overnight. The next morning, it had flown away, its wing perfectly healed. The stray dog that had followed her home one winter, starving and sick, its ribs showing through mangy fur. She'd fed it scraps and let it sleep by the fire. By morning, it was healthy, strong. It had stayed with her for 3 years before disappearing into the woods one night, never to return. The way animals always seemed to trust her, calm around her, even the ones that should have been afraid. Bears that watched her from a distance but never charged. Wolves that crossed her path and simply stared before moving on. She'd always thought it was luck, or coincidence, or maybe just good instincts, but now she wasn't sure. A soft scratching sound at the door pulled her from her spiraling thoughts. Kaia sat up, her pulse quickening. The scratching came again, low, insistent, accompanied by a faint whimper. She crossed the room quickly and pressed her ear to the door. A whimper, definitely a whimper. "Frost?" she whispered. Another whimper, louder this time. Distressed. Kaia tried the handle, knowing it was pointless. Locked. But the scratching continued, frantic now, and then a voice. Female, sharp and cruel. "Get away from the door, pup. You don't belong here. Your mother's dead, and you're nothing but a burden." Kaia's stomach dropped. She heard Frost yelp, a sound of pure pain. Without thinking, Kaia slammed her palm against the door hard enough to rattle the frame. "Leave her alone!" Silence. Then footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, moving closer. The lock clicked. The door swung open violently, slamming against the interior wall. A woman stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair pulled back in a severe braid. Her face was all hard angles and cold eyes. She wore leather and fur, and her stance was aggressive, territorial. In her hand, she held Frost by the scruff of her neck, dangling the terrified pup in the air like a piece of trash. The pup was trembling, her small paws scrabbling uselessly. "You the one who thinks she's special?" the woman said, her voice dripping with disdain. She looked Kaia up and down, her lip curling. "The human who glows?" Kaia's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Put her down." The woman smirked. "Why?" "She's pack property, not yours. You're nobody here. Just a stray Darian picked up because he's desperate." "She's a pup," Kaia said, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "A baby. What the hell is wrong with you? Put her down. Now." The woman's smirk widened. She shook Frost slightly, making the pup yelp again. "Or what?" she taunted. "You going to glow at me? Show me your magic trick?" And Kaia felt something inside her snap. Heat surged through her body. Not the silver light this time, but something darker, hotter, angrier. It roared up from somewhere deep in her chest, flooding her veins, setting her nerve endings on fire. The air around her shimmered, distorting like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. The woman's eyes widened. Her smirk vanished. She stumbled back a step, her grip on Frost loosening. The pup dropped to the ground with a thump and immediately scrambled behind Kaia's legs, pressing herself against Kaia's calves. "What the hell?" the woman started, her voice higher now, uncertain. But Kaia stepped forward, and the heat intensified. She didn't know what she was doing, didn't know how to control it, but she didn't care. All she knew was that this woman had hurt Frost, and every instinct in her body was screaming, protect, defend, destroy. The woman stumbled back another step, her face going pale. You can't." "Get out," Kaia said, her voice low and deadly calm, each word precise. "Final. And if you ever touch her again, I will make you regret it. Do you understand me?" The woman stared at her, eyes wide with something that looked like fear. Then she turned and ran, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. The heat drained from Kaia's body all at once. Her legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath, her entire body shaking violently. Sweat poured down her face. Her vision swam. It felt like she'd just run 10 miles uphill. Frost nuzzled against her immediately, whimpering softly, licking Kaia's trembling hands. Kaia wrapped her arms around the pup and held her close, burying her face in the soft fur. "I don't know what I am," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But I'm not letting anyone hurt you. I promise. I promise." Frost licked her cheek, her small body warm and trusting. And for the first time since stepping through the gate, Kaia felt something other than fear and confusion. She felt purpose. She felt protective. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was supposed to be, even if she didn't understand why yet. Morning came too soon. Kaia woke to the sound of the door unlocking. She was curled on the floor, still wearing yesterday's clothes, with Frost tucked against her chest. Every muscle in her body ached like she'd been beaten. Corvin stepped inside, his expression grim. When he saw her on the floor, concern flickered across his face. "Get up," he said, but his tone was gentler than his words. "Darian wants to see you." Kaia pushed herself to her feet slowly, wincing. Frost woke and stretched, yawning to show tiny, sharp teeth. "What happened last night?" Corvin asked, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Rena came to me this morning demanding you be thrown out of the compound. She says you attacked her." Kaia's jaw tightened. "She was hurting Frost, dangling her by the neck. I stopped her." "How?" "I don't know," Kaia said honestly. I got angry, and something happened. Heat. Like before, but different. Darker." Corvin studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. "Omega abilities aren't just healing, Kaia. They're about balance, about maintaining harmony in the pack. That includes protection, defense, sometimes even aggression when necessary. What you did to Rena, that was your instincts kicking in, protecting what you see as yours." "Frost isn't mine," Kaia said quietly. "Your instincts don't know that," Corvin replied. "Come on, we need to go." He led her through the compound. In the daylight, it looked even more imposing. The buildings were a mix of old and new. Some looked centuries old, built from stone and timber, while others were clearly more recent construction. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys. The smell of cooking meat filled the air. And everywhere, there were wolves. Some in human form, walking upright, dressed in practical clothing. Others shifted, padding on 4 legs, their fur gleaming in the morning sun. A few were in-between states, partially transformed with elongated features and claws. All of them watched her. Some with curiosity, tilting their heads as she passed. Some with suspicion, their eyes narrowed and hostile. And a few with outright hatred, their lips pulled back to show teeth. Kaia kept her head down and followed Corvin closely, acutely aware of Frost trotting at her heels. They arrived at the central hall, The same building where she'd healed Frost the night before. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Darian stood at the head of a long wooden table, surrounded by a dozen others. They all turned when she entered, and the conversation died instantly. "Sit," Darian said, gesturing to an empty chair near the end of the table. Kaia sat. Frost immediately jumped into her lap. Several of the wolves around the table stiffened at that. One, an older woman with silver hair, actually gasped. Darian leaned forward, his hands braced on the table. His eyes were bloodshot, like he hadn't slept. "Rena says you attacked her last night, that you threatened her life." Kaia met his gaze steadily. "She was hurting Frost, shaking her, taunting her about her mother being dead. I told her to stop. She didn't, so I made her stop." "And how did you do that exactly?" This came from a man sitting to Darian's right, middle-aged, with gray-streaked hair and a face like carved granite. Kaia met his eyes. "I don't know. Something happened. Heat. Energy." She got scared and ran. The man laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and mocking. "This is what we're trusting our future to. A human who doesn't even know what she is? Who loses control and attacks pack members?" "She's not human," Corvin said sharply, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Then what is she?" The man, Garrett, she remembered Darian calling him, shot back. "Because she sure as hell doesn't act like one of us. She doesn't know our laws, doesn't respect our hierarchy, shows up out of nowhere and expects us to just accept her because she made some lights appear?" "That's enough, Garrett," Darian said coldly, his voice carrying unmistakable authority. Garrett leaned back in his chair, but his eyes never left Kaia. The hostility radiating from him was palpable. Darian turned his attention back to Kaia. "You healed Frost. You drove off Rena. You're exhibiting Omega traits, healing, protection, emotional influence. But you have no training, no control, no understanding of what that means for this pack or for yourself." "Then teach me," Kaia said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. The room went silent, every eye fixed on her. Darian's eyes narrowed. "Why? So you can learn what you need and leave the second you figure it out? So you can go back to your cabin and pretend none of this happened?" "No," Kaia said quietly but firmly. "Because those pups deserve better than what happened to them. Because your sister didn't deserve to die like that. And because if I can help, if I can do something to stop this pack from falling apart, then I will. Not because I want to be here, not because I asked for this, but because it's the right thing to do." Darian stared at her for a long, tense moment. The silence stretched. Then he straightened, his decision made. "Fine," he said. "You want to help? Then prove it. There's a pack gathering tonight. 3 neighboring alphas are coming to assess our strength, to see if we're still viable or if our territory should be absorbed by stronger packs. If they sense weakness, they'll challenge me for leadership. And if I fall, this pack falls with me. Everyone here will be scattered, forced to join other packs or go rogue." Kaia's pulse quickened. "What do you want me to do?" "Stand with me," Darian said, his golden eyes boring into hers. "At my side. Show them we still have an Omega. Show them we're not broken, that we're still whole." "But I don't know what I'm doing," Kaia protested. "I can't control—" "You don't have to control it," Darian interrupted. "You just have to be it. Let them see you. Let them feel what you are. That's all I'm asking." Kaia swallowed hard. "And if they don't believe me? If they think I'm faking it or—" Darian's expression darkened, his jaw setting in a hard line. "Then we fight," he said simply, "and a lot of people die." Before Kaia could respond, before she could process what he was asking of her, a howl rose in the distance, long, mournful, a clear signal. Every wolf in the room tensed. Corvin moved to the window, looking out toward the mountains. "They're early," he said grimly. Darian's hands clenched into fists on the table. "How many?" he asked, his voice tight. Corvin was silent for a moment, counting. 3 packs, he said finally. "Just like you expected. But they brought more than just their alphas, Darian. They brought enforcers, witnesses. This isn't just an assessment." Darian's face went cold. "It's a tribunal." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Garrett stood abruptly. "Then we prepare for war. We don't let them dictate. We can't win a war against 3 packs." Darian cut him off sharply. Not in our current state. We're already fractured. Half our fighters left last week. We'd be slaughtered. Then what do you suggest? Garrett demanded. That we roll over and accept whatever judgment they hand down? Darian's eyes slid to Kaia, and she understood. She was the key. The only thing standing between this pack and total destruction. A human woman who didn't understand what she was, thrust into a supernatural world she'd never known existed, now responsible for the survival of dozens of lives. The weight of it crashed down on her shoulders. Frost whimpered in her lap, sensing her distress. Kaia stroked the pup's head, trying to calm her racing heart. When do they arrive? She asked, surprised her voice didn't shake. Sunset, Corvin said quietly. 3 hours. 3 hours to figure out how to be something she didn't understand. 3 hours to save a pack that didn't trust her. 3 hours to prove she was worth keeping alive. Kaia looked at Darian. His eyes were hard, desperate, waiting. She took a deep breath. Okay, she said. Tell me what to do. And outside the howls grew louder, closer. The other packs were coming. And Kaia Thornridge, Omega, outcast, prisoner, was about to face her first true test. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Corvin pulled Kaia from the hall before anyone could object, steering her through winding pathways to a smaller building tucked against the mountainside. Inside, the space was sparse but functional. A training room, Kaia realized, taking in the padded mats, the weapon racks, the scent of sweat and leather. We don't have time to teach you everything, Corvin said, closing the door behind them. But we can teach you enough to survive the next few hours. Kaia set Frost down gently. The pup immediately curled up in the corner, watching with intelligent amber eyes. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be, Kaia said, frustration bleeding into her voice. How am I supposed to convince a bunch of alphas that I'm something I don't understand? You don't convince them, Corvin replied, moving to the center of the room. You show them. Omega energy isn't something you fake, Kaia. It's something you are, and they'll feel it the moment you walk into that clearing, whether you understand it or not. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be reassuring. It's meant to be true. Corvin gestured for her to join him. Come here. We need to see what you can do when you're not panicking. Kaia approached slowly, her stomach tight with anxiety. Close your eyes, Corvin instructed. She did. Now breathe deep and slow. Feel the air filling your lungs. Feel your heartbeat. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Kaia tried, but her thoughts were racing, spiraling. The tribunal, the other packs, Darian's desperate eyes, the weight of lives she didn't know resting on shoulders that weren't strong enough. You're thinking, Corvin said quietly. Stop thinking. Just feel. I can't. Yes, you can. You did it last night, with Frost, with Renna. You didn't think, you acted. You let your instincts guide you. Do it again. Kaia focused on her breathing. In, out, and slowly, very slowly, she felt something shift. A warmth in her chest, subtle, like embers buried under ash. Good, Corvin murmured. That's it. That's your center. Your core. Every Omega has one. It's where your power comes from. Now reach for it, gently. Don't force it. Kaia reached inward toward that warmth. It responded immediately, flaring brighter. Heat spread through her veins, but this time it didn't feel chaotic or frightening. It felt right, natural, like finding a muscle she'd never known she had. Open your eyes, Corvin said. She did, and gasped. Her hands were glowing, not bright, just a faint silver shimmer, like moonlight on water. That's Omega light, Corvin explained, his voice steady. It's a manifestation of your energy, your bond to the pack. The stronger the bond, the stronger the light. But I don't have a bond with this pack, Kaia protested. I don't even know most of them. You have a bond with Frost, Corvin said, nodding toward the pup. And Shadow, and Ember. That's enough to start. Bonds aren't built overnight, Kaia. They're built through choice, through protection, through sacrifice. The light flickered and faded as Kaia's concentration wavered. How do I control it? She asked. You don't control it, Corvin said. You guide it. Let it flow through you, not from you. It's not a weapon. It's a bridge. They practiced for 2 more hours. Corvin taught her how to call the light without fear, how to let it fade without forcing it, how to sense emotions in others, a skill that made Kaia's head spin when she accidentally felt Corvin's deep concern and carefully hidden grief. By the time they finished, Kaia was exhausted but steadier. "Will it be enough?" she asked as they left the training room. Corvin didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy. "I don't know, but it's all we have." Shit. The sun was setting when they gathered. The clearing was massive, a natural amphitheater carved into the mountainside, surrounded by towering pines. Firelight flickered from torches staked into the ground, casting dancing shadows across the assembled wolves. Iron Ridge Pack stood on one side, smaller than Kaia had expected. Maybe 40 wolves total, many of them young or old. Too few fighters, too many vulnerabilities. On the opposite side, 3 other packs waited. They were larger, stronger. Their wolves stood with the confidence of those who'd never known real defeat. At the center of each group stood their alpha. The first was a woman, tall and lean, with white blonde hair and eyes like ice. She radiated cold authority. The second was a massive man, easily 6.5 feet tall, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. His presence was pure intimidation. The third was younger, maybe early 30s, with dark skin and sharp, calculating eyes. He looked like a strategist, a hunter. All 3 were staring at Darian, and none of them looked friendly. Kaia stood at Darian's side, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wore borrowed clothes, simple black pants and a gray tunic, and the silver pendant hung visible against her chest. Corvin stood on Darian's other side. Behind them, the rest of Iron Ridge Pack formed a semicircle, silent and tense. Frost, Shadow, and Ember sat at Kaia's feet. She'd wanted to leave them behind, but Corvin had insisted. "They're your proof," he'd said. "Let them be seen." The blonde alpha stepped forward first, her movements fluid and predatory. "Darian Voss," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the clearing. 3 weeks ago, you lost your Omega. 2 weeks ago, your pack began to fracture. 6 days ago, you lost 4 members to defection. You stand here tonight barely holding on to what remains." She paused, her ice blue eyes sweeping over Iron Ridge's assembled wolves with obvious disdain. "The Council questions whether Iron Ridge still deserves its territory, whether it can defend its borders, whether it can survive." "We survive," Darian said, his voice hard as steel. "We've survived for 3 generations. We'll survive 3 more. The scarred alpha laughed, a low, rumbling sound. "With what? Half a pack and no Omega? You're bleeding wolves, Voss. Another month and you'll have nothing left but ghosts and memory." "Then it's fortunate," Darian said coldly, "that we found our new Omega." He gestured to Kaia. Every eye in the clearing turned to her. The weight of their stares was crushing. Kaia forced herself to stand straight, to meet their gazes, even as her pulse thundered in her ears. The blonde alpha's eyes narrowed. "Her? She's human." "She's Thornridge bloodline," Corvin interjected. "Last of her line. Awakened 3 days ago when she saved the alpha's sister's pups from death." The third alpha, the strategist, stepped forward, his expression skeptical. "The Thornridge line died out 30 years ago. Everyone knows that." "Clearly not everyone," Darian said flatly. The blonde alpha moved closer, circling Kaia like a predator assessing prey. Kaia forced herself not to flinch, not to step back. "If she's truly an Omega," the woman said slowly, "then she'll have the light. Show us." Kaia's stomach dropped. She looked at Darian. His expression was unreadable, but she saw the tension in his shoulders, the fear he was hiding. This was it, the moment everything hinged on. Kaia closed her eyes and reached for that warmth in her chest, the core Corvin had helped her find. For a terrifying second there was nothing, just cold fear and the sound of her own heartbeat. Then, heat. It blossomed in her chest, spreading through her limbs like liquid sunlight. She opened her eyes and raised her hands. Silver light poured from her palms, soft and steady, illuminating the clearing with an otherworldly glow. Gasps echoed through the assembled wolves. The 3 alphas stared. Even Darian's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his face before he schooled it back to neutrality. Kaia held the light for 10 seconds. 20. 30. Then she let it fade, her hands trembling with the effort. Silence. The blonde alpha stepped back, her expression unreadable. The scarred alpha crossed his arms, studying Kaia with new interest. The strategist tilted his head, his eyes calculating. She has the light, the blonde alpha said finally. But light alone doesn't make an omega. Where's the bond? Where's the pack cohesion? We're rebuilding, Darien said. You're broken, the scarred alpha countered, and a single untrained omega isn't going to fix that. Then what do you suggest? Darien's voice was dangerously quiet. That we disband? That you divide our territory among yourselves and scatter our wolves to the wind? The strategist smiled, a cold, calculated expression. We suggest a trial. If your omega is real, if your pack is truly viable, then prove it. Let her demonstrate what she can do. Let her show us she's worth the title. Kaia's blood ran cold. What kind of trial? Corvin demanded. The strategist's smile widened. The same trial every omega faces when their abilities are questioned. The gauntlet. Darien went absolutely still. No, he said, his voice flat and final. Absolutely not. Then you forfeit your territory, the blonde alpha said simply, and your pack dissolves tonight. The gauntlet hasn't been used in 50 years, Corvin protested, his voice tight with anger. It's barbaric. It's meant for trained omegas, not humans playing at being wolves, the scarred alpha finished, his tone mocking. If she's truly what you claim, she'll survive. If not, he shrugged. Then you have your answer. Kaia looked at Darien. What's the gauntlet? Darien's jaw clenched. He didn't answer. Corvin did, his voice heavy. It's a test of omega abilities. The candidate enters a hostile environment, usually a challenge arena, and must calm or subdue aggressive wolves using only their omega influence. No physical force, no weapons, just the bond. How many wolves? Kaia asked, her mouth dry. 3, the strategist said. 3 of our choosing. Wolves trained to resist omega influence. Wolves who've been conditioned to see omegas as threats, not anchors. You're asking her to die, Darien growled. We're asking her to prove herself, the blonde alpha corrected. If she fails, your pack was already doomed. If she succeeds, she paused. Then perhaps Iron Ridge deserves to continue. Kaia's mind raced. She could refuse. She could walk away, let the pack fall. It wasn't her responsibility. These weren't her people. But then she looked down at Frost, Shadow, and Ember. 3 pups who'd survived against impossible odds, who'd lost their mother to violence and hatred. At Darien, standing rigid with barely controlled fury and desperation. At the 40 wolves of Iron Ridge, watching her with expressions ranging from hope to resignation. They were broken. But they were still fighting, and Kaia realized with startling clarity she'd been broken too, for most of her life. Alone in a cabin, surviving but not living, keeping the world at arm's length because it was safer that way. But these wolves, they were trying to hold on to each other, to family, to home. Maybe that was worth fighting for, even if she didn't fully understand it yet. Kaia looked at the 3 alphas. I'll do it, she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Kaia, no, Darien started. I'll do it, she repeated, louder this time. When? The strategist's smile turned almost admiring. Now. They led her to a smaller clearing ringed with torches. In the center, 3 wolves waited, not in human form, fully shifted, massive, predatory. The first was gray and black, its eyes burning yellow with aggression. The second was rust-colored, its lips pulled back in a constant snarl. The third was pure white, the largest of the 3, and it watched Kaia with an intelligence that was somehow more terrifying than rage. The rules are simple, the blonde alpha announced to the gathered crowd. Kaia Thornridge will enter the circle. The wolves will attack. She must calm all 3 using only omega abilities. No shifting, no fighting back. If she draws blood or harms any of them, she fails. If they draw her blood, the woman paused. We intervene, eventually. This is murder, Corvin hissed to Darien. It's the only option they're giving us, Darien replied, his voice hollow. Kaia stepped toward the circle. Darien caught her arm, pulling her back. You don't have to do this. We'll find another way. There is no other way, Kaia said quietly. You know that. They've already decided. Either I prove myself or your pack dies tonight. Darian's grip tightened. You could die. Then I die trying to save something worth saving. Kaia looked up at him, surprised by how calm she felt. That's more than I've done with my life so far. Something flickered in Darian's eyes. Shock maybe, or recognition. He released her arms slowly. Kaia walked into the circle. The moment she crossed the line of torches, the wolves moved. The gray one lunged first, impossibly fast. Kaia's instincts screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to stand still. She reached for her center, for that warmth. The wolf hit her like a freight train. She went down hard, the air exploding from her lungs. Teeth snapped inches from her throat. Hot breath washed over her face. Terror flooded her system. But beneath the terror, something else rose. That heat. That power. Kaia pressed her palm against the wolf's chest and pushed. Not physically. Energetically. Silver light exploded from her hand. The wolf yelped and stumbled back, shaking its head. Kaia scrambled to her feet, gasping. The rust-colored wolf circled her, snarling. The white one watched, waiting. Calm them, Corvin's voice drifted from outside the circle. Don't fight them. Calm them. Calm them. Right. Kaia closed her eyes and reached deeper, past the fear, past the adrenaline. She thought of frost, trembling in the snow, of Shadow's curious eyes, of Ember's quiet trust. The warmth in her chest expanded, flooding her entire body. When she opened her eyes, silver light was pouring from her skin, not just her hands, but everywhere. She was glowing like a beacon. The rust-colored wolf stopped circling. Its snarl faltered. Kaia took a step toward it, her hands outstretched. It's okay, she whispered. I'm not a threat. I'm not your enemy. The wolf's ears flicked forward. Kaia took another step. I know you're scared. I know you don't trust me, but I'm not here to hurt you. She was close enough to touch it now. Slowly, so slowly, she reached out and placed her hand on the wolf's head. The connection was instantaneous. She felt its fear, its confusion, the conditioning that had taught it to hate what she was. But beneath that, she felt something else. Loneliness, exhaustion, a desperate need for pack, for belonging, for something to anchor to. Kaia poured warmth into that need, letting her energy flow through the connection. The wolf's snarl faded. It leaned into her touch. And then, slowly, it lay down at her feet. One down. The gray wolf charged again. This time Kaia was ready. She met it head on, dropping to her knees and throwing her arms around its neck as it barreled into her. They rolled together, and for a moment she was certain she'd failed, that teeth would find her throat. But she held on, and she felt. This wolf was different, angrier, more damaged. It had been hurt, betrayed, taught that Omegas were manipulators, not healers. I'm sorry, Kaia gasped against its fur. I'm sorry for whatever they did to you. I'm sorry you were hurt. But I'm not them. I'm not going to hurt you. I promise. The wolf thrashed. Kaia held tighter, letting silver light pour from her body into its. I promise, she repeated, her voice breaking. I promise. The wolf went still. Then slowly, it stopped fighting. Its body relaxed against hers. Kaia released it, trembling. Two down. The white wolf stepped forward. It was massive, easily twice the size of the others. And unlike them, its eyes weren't wild with aggression or fear. They were calculating, testing. This wasn't about survival. This was about dominance. The wolf wanted to see if she was strong enough to stand against a true challenge. Kaia pushed herself to her feet, every muscle screaming in protest. She was exhausted, drained. The light was flickering, fading, but she stood, and she met the white wolf's gaze. You want to know if I'm real? She said, her voice hoarse but steady. Fine. Let's find out. She didn't wait for it to charge. She walked toward it. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to run, to protect herself. But she kept walking. The white wolf lowered its head, a warning growl rumbling from its chest. Kaia didn't stop. She walked until she was standing directly in front of it, close enough to feel its breath, close enough to see her reflection in its predatory eyes. Then she did something that defied all logic. She knelt, making herself vulnerable, submissive, but not weak. She placed both palms on the ground and let every ounce of energy she had left pour out of her body and into the earth beneath them. The clearing lit up like daylight. Silver light erupted from the ground in waves, washing over all three wolves, over the watching packs, over everything. And in that light, Kaia showed them what she was. Not a threat, not a weapon, but a bridge, a bond, an anchor. The white wolf lowered its head, touched its nose to her forehead, and bowed. The clearing erupted in shocked whispers. Kaia collapsed, the light fading as consciousness slipped away. The last thing she heard was Darian's voice, sharp with panic. Kaia! Then darkness claimed her. Ascend. She woke to chaos. Voices shouting, movement, the acrid smell of smoke and gunpowder. Kaia's eyes flew open. She was being carried. Darian had her in his arms, running through the compound. What happened? She gasped. Hunters, Darian bit out, his voice tight with fury. They waited until we were all gathered, until we were distracted. They're hitting us now. Gunfire cracked through the night. Silver bullets. Kaia heard screaming, heard wolves howling in pain. The pups, she started. Corvin has them, Darian said. But we're surrounded. They knew exactly when to strike. He set her down behind a stone wall as another volley of gunfire ripped through the air. Kaia's head spun. Her body felt like lead. But through the haze, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. She'd passed the trial. She'd proven herself. And now the pack she'd just saved was being slaughtered. How many hunters, she asked. 20, maybe more. Darian's face was carved from stone. They have silver weapons, gas. They're not here to scare us. They're here to exterminate us. A wolf screamed nearby, a sound of pure agony. Kaia's hands clenched into fists. The warmth in her chest, depleted, exhausted, flickered weakly, but it was still there. She looked at Darian. The other packs, are they helping? Darian's expression darkened. They're evacuating. They won't risk their wolves for hours. Of course they wouldn't. They'd come to Judge Ironridge, not to save it. Another explosion rocked the compound. Flames erupted from one of the longhouses, and Kaia realized she had a choice. She could run, could escape with Darian, with the pups, with whoever survived, could disappear back into the mountains and pretend this had never happened, or she could do what every instinct in her body was screaming at her to do. She could fight, not with claws or teeth, but with what she was. Kaia pushed herself to her feet, ignoring Darian's protest. What are you doing? He demanded. Something stupid, Kaia said, and she walked toward the gunfire. Kaia, no! Darian's hand shot out, grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. His eyes were wild with something that looked like terror. You can barely stand. You'll be killed in seconds. Maybe, Kaia said, meeting his gaze. But I didn't survive the gauntlet just to hide while your pack gets massacred. Another explosion shook the ground. Screams echoed from the eastern perimeter. The sharp crack of gunfire punctuated the chaos like a deadly drumbeat. Darian's grip tightened. You don't understand what you're walking into. These hunters aren't amateurs. They know our weaknesses. They have silver bullets that will drop a wolf in seconds. Gas that burns our lungs. They've been planning this for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment when we'd all be gathered and vulnerable. Then they didn't count on me? Kaia said, her voice steadier than she felt. She pulled her arm free and stepped around the stone wall. The compound was a war zone. Fires burned across multiple buildings, casting hellish orange light across the smoke-filled air. Wolves in both forms darted between structures, some carrying wounded, others engaging hunters who'd breached the perimeter. The sound of silver bullets hitting flesh was sickeningly distinct, a wet thud followed by howls of agony as the poisonous metal spread through veins like acid. Near the main gate, Kaia could see the hunters' main force, 20 men and women, heavily armed, dressed in tactical gear that looked military-grade. They moved with precision, their weapons raised, their faces hidden behind gas masks that made them look inhuman. Soulless. And they were winning. Iron Ridge wolves were falling back, outnumbered and outgunned. Several already lay motionless on the ground, their bodies twisted in death, silver spreading through their veins in dark, spidery patterns. A young wolf, barely more than a teenager in human years, was dragging himself across the dirt, his legs shattered by a bullet, leaving a trail of blood behind him. Kaia's hands trembled. She reached for her center, for that warmth that had saved Frost, that had conquered the gauntlet. Nothing. She was empty, completely drained. The well of power that had burned so brightly just hours ago was dry, scraped clean by the trial she'd barely survived. Panic flickered through her chest. Darian appeared at her side, his face grim. "You can't do this. Whatever you're planning, you don't have the strength. You've already given everything." "I don't have a plan," Kaia admitted, her eyes fixed on the hunters as they advanced deeper into the compound, their weapons sweeping methodically. "But I have to try something. I can't just stand here and watch." She thought of Frost, Shadow, and Ember. 3 tiny lives she'd saved from the snow. 3 pups who deserved to grow up in a pack, not die because she was too weak or too scared to act when it mattered most. And something shifted. Deep in her chest, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the fear, beneath the certainty that she had nothing left. A spark. Small. Fragile. Like the last ember in a dying fire. But real. Kaia closed her eyes and grabbed onto that spark with everything she had. She fed it with memory. With purpose. With the image of those pups' amber eyes looking up at her with absolute trust. With the feel of Frost's tiny heartbeat fluttering back to life under her palms. With the moment Shadow had first wagged his tail at her. With Ember's quiet, steadfast presence. The spark grew. Heat bloomed in her chest, spreading through her limbs like sunrise breaking over a frozen landscape. Not the gentle warmth from before. This was different. Hotter, fiercer, desperate and primal and utterly relentless. When she opened her eyes, her hands were glowing faintly. Barely visible in the firelight, but there. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "Cover me," she said to Darian, her voice low and determined. "Kaia, trust me." She looked at him, and something passed between them. An understanding, a choice, a recognition that sometimes the only way forward was through the fire. "Please." Darian's jaw clenched so hard she could hear his teeth grinding. Then he shifted. The transformation was brutal and beautiful all at once. Bones cracked and reformed with sounds like breaking branches. Muscle expanded, rippling under skin that sprouted dark fur. His spine curved, his face elongated, his fingers became claws. Within seconds, where the man had stood, a massive black wolf now crouched, easily 500 pounds of pure predator, all lean muscle and deadly intent. His golden eyes fixed on her for one moment, a moment that held 1,000 unspoken words. Then he charged toward the hunters, drawing their fire with a howl that shook the night. Kaia ran in the opposite direction, moving parallel to the gate, using the burning buildings as cover. Her body screamed in protest with every step. Her vision swam, her lungs burned from smoke inhalation, but she kept moving, driven by something deeper than physical strength. She needed to get closer, close enough to touch them. A hunter spotted her, a tall man with a rifle, his tactical vest covered in ammunition pouches. He swung the weapon toward her with mechanical precision, his finger tightening on the trigger. Kaia dove behind a stone water trough as the bullet cracked past her head, close enough that she felt the displacement of air against her cheek. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape her chest. She couldn't fight them, couldn't outrun them, couldn't match their weapons or their training, but she didn't need to. She just needed to reach them. Kaia pushed herself up and ran again, zigzagging between cover like her grandmother had taught her when hunting skittish deer. Another bullet whined past, striking the ground near her feet and throwing up a spray of dirt. Then another, closer this time. She was 10 yards from the nearest hunter now, 5 yards. The hunter, a woman this time, shorter but no less lethal, turned toward her, raising a pistol with the smooth confidence of someone who'd killed before. Kaia didn't slow down. She didn't think. She just acted. She crashed into the woman with her shoulder, using her full body weight and momentum, knocking them both to the ground in a tangle of limbs. The pistol skittered away across the dirt, disappearing into the shadows. The hunter recovered fast, trained reflexes kicking in. She tried to throw Kaia off, reaching for a knife at her belt with practiced efficiency. Kaia grabbed the woman's wrist with both hands and let everything pour out. The silver light exploded from her palms, flooding into the hunter's body through the point of contact. But this wasn't healing light. This was something else entirely. Emotion, raw and overwhelming and utterly devastating. Fear, grief, desperation. The absolute terror of watching everything you care about being destroyed. The crushing weight of responsibility. The loneliness of being the only thing standing between life and death. The bone-deep exhaustion of fighting battles you never asked for. Every feeling Kaia had experienced since finding those dying pups in the snow, she poured it all into the hunter without filter, without mercy. The hunter's eyes went wide behind her gas mask. She gasped, her body going rigid as the emotional assault hit her like a physical blow. Kaia held on, pouring more into her. Every moment of confusion and despair. Every second of terror when she'd thought the pups wouldn't survive. The crushing weight of the gauntlet. The certainty that she was about to die. The desperate clawing need to protect the innocent. The hunter's knife fell from her hand, clattering against a stone. She stopped fighting, and then she started screaming. Not in pain, in terror, in understanding. The woman scrambled backward, tearing off her gas mask with shaking hands, revealing a face pale and slick with sweat. Her eyes were wide, seeing something Kaia couldn't, or perhaps seeing the compound for the first time as it truly was. No, no, no! She looked around wildly, as if the world had suddenly shifted beneath her feet. Looking at the wolves she'd been hunting not as monsters, but as people, as families desperately defending their homes, as parents trying to protect their children, as victims. The woman turned and ran, dropping her weapons as she fled toward the gate, her screams echoing through the night. Kaia collapsed to her hands and knees, gasping for breath, her entire body trembling violently. 1 down. 19 to go. A shadow fell over her. Kaia looked up slowly, her vision blurred with exhaustion. Another hunter stood above her, the tall man with the rifle from before. His weapon was pointed directly at her head, the barrel steady and unwavering. "Don't move," he said coldly, his voice muffled by the gas mask. Kaia's vision blurred further. She didn't have enough left for another emotional assault, didn't have enough to defend herself, didn't even have enough to stand. This was it. She closed her eyes, oddly calm in the face of death. A blur of white fur slammed into the hunter from the side with the force of a battering ram. The rifle fired, the bullet going wide, striking a wooden post and sending splinters flying. The white wolf from the gauntlet, the one who'd tested her, who'd demanded proof of her strength, who'd bowed to her in the end, now had the hunter pinned to the ground, massive jaws inches from his throat. Its breath came in hot, aggressive pants, and its claws dug into the man's vest hard enough to tear through the fabric. But it didn't bite. It looked at Kaia, waiting, seeking permission. Kaia pushed herself up, every movement agony, every muscle screaming in protest. She stumbled over to them on legs that barely supported her weight and placed her hand on the hunter's chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. His eyes were wide with terror behind the mask's transparent panel. "Feel it," Kaia whispered, letting her remaining energy trickle out like water from a cracked vessel. Not overwhelming this time. Gentle, insistent, undeniable. "Feel what you're doing, who you're hurting." The man's breathing hitched, rapid and shallow, and Kaia showed him. Through the connection, she let him feel what she felt. The bond with the pups, the pure, uncomplicated trust of creatures who depended on her absolutely. The desperate love Darian had for his sister, a wound that would never fully heal. The grief of a pack watching itself die piece by piece. The fear of parents trying to protect their children from violence they didn't deserve. The old wolves who'd lived here for decades, who knew every stone and tree, facing the destruction of their only home. The humanity beneath the fur, the people beneath the perceived monsters. Tears streaked down the man's face, visible even behind the mask. His chest heaved with sobs. "I didn't..." His voice cracked, breaking on the words. "They told us you were monsters, that you killed people for sport, that you were a threat to everyone around you, that you'd attacked human settlements." "We're survivors," Kaia said softly, her voice hoarse but clear. "Just like you. We just want to protect our families, just like you. We never asked for this war. We just want to live." The man was sobbing now, his entire body shaking with the force of his grief and guilt and sudden, terrible understanding. The white wolf stepped back, releasing him but keeping its eyes fixed on him with predatory intensity. The hunter scrambled to his feet and ran, following his companion into the darkness beyond the gate, his weapon abandoned on the ground. 2 down. A massive explosion rocked the compound, bigger than all the others combined. The armory. Flames shot 50 feet into the air, a mushroom cloud of fire and debris that lit up the night like a second sun. The shockwave knocked Kaia flat, stealing the air from her lungs and leaving her ears ringing. When she pushed herself up, coughing and disoriented, she saw Corvin in human form, blood streaming down his face from a gash above his eye. He was carrying Frost in his arms, and the pup was unconscious, her small body limp. "Kaia!" Corvin shouted over the chaos, his voice barely audible through the ringing in her ears. "The pups are trapped in the northern den. Fire's spreading fast. The hunters blocked the exits with debris. We can't get to them." Kaia's blood turned to ice. "Shadow and Ember and 12 others," Corvin said grimly, his face grim with the knowledge of impending loss. 14 pups total. They're going to burn alive if someone doesn't get them out in the next few minutes. No, 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 no. Kaia looked around wildly, her mind racing despite the exhaustion. The hunters were regrouping near the gate, organizing for another coordinated push. Darian and the other wolves were engaged on the eastern perimeter, desperately trying to prevent the hunters from surrounding the compound completely and cutting off any escape routes. No one was available to mount a rescue. No one had the strength or the time, except her. Kaia took Frost from Corvin's arms, checking the pup quickly with trembling hands. Shallow breathing, smoke inhalation, burns on her paws, but alive. "Get her to Marin," Kaia said, handing the pup back. "Now, don't stop for anything." "What are you—" Corvin started, his eyes widening as he realized her intent. But Kaia was already running toward the northern den, her legs pumping despite the pain, despite the exhaustion, despite every rational thought screaming at her to stop. The heat hit her 50 yards out, a physical wall of superheated air that made her skin feel like it was blistering. The fire had spread faster than seemed possible, consuming the longhouse adjacent to the den and sending flames licking toward the smaller structure where the pups were trapped. Smoke billowed thick and black, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Kaia could hear them. The pups. Crying, howling, terrified and confused and knowing, on some instinctive level, that they were going to die. She wrapped her scarf around her nose and mouth, a futile gesture against smoke this thick, and plunged into the inferno. The temperature spiked immediately, going from unbearable to impossible. Her eyes watered so badly she could barely see. Her lungs burned with every breath, the superheated air searing delicate tissue. Sweat poured down her face, evaporating almost instantly in the intense heat. She couldn't see anything through the smoke, just vague shapes and the orange glow of flames all around her. "Shadow!" she screamed, her voice raw and desperate. "Ember! Where are you?" A chorus of terrified whimpers answered from her left, barely audible over the roar of the fire. Kaia stumbled toward the sound, her hands outstretched like a blind woman, touching walls that were hot enough to burn through her gloves. She found a wall, then a doorway, then small bodies, huddled together in the corner of the den, pressed against each other in a futile attempt to escape the smoke and heat. 14 pups total, ranging from barely weaned to a few months old. Their eyes glowed in the darkness, amber and gold and silver, wide with the kind of terror that only comes when death is certain and escape is impossible. Shadow and Ember pressed themselves against her legs immediately, whining desperately, their small bodies shaking with fear and smoke inhalation. "It's okay," Kaia coughed, gathering as many as she could into her arms, feeling their rapid heartbeats against her chest. "We're getting out of here. I promise. I promise you're going to be okay." But when she turned back toward the entrance, her heart sank into her stomach. The doorway was blocked. A burning beam, massive and ancient, had collapsed across it during the explosion, trapping them inside. The wood was engulfed in flames, too hot to touch, too heavy to move, even if she could have withstood the heat. The smoke was getting thicker by the second, settling low to the ground where the pups huddled. The heat more intense, the air more toxic. They had minutes, maybe less, maybe seconds. Kaia set the pups down and grabbed the beam with both hands, ignoring the immediate searing pain as her gloves began to smolder. She pulled with everything she had. The beam didn't budge. Too heavy, too hot, too impossible. She tried again, screaming with effort, her muscles burning almost as much as her hands. Nothing. The pups were crying harder now, their small bodies racked with coughing fits as the smoke filled their lungs. Several had collapsed, too weak to even whimper anymore. Kaia's vision started to fade, black spots dancing at the edges as her oxygen-starved brain began to shut down. Not enough air, not enough strength, not enough time. This was how it ended. She'd saved 3 pups from the snow only to die with 14 others in fire. The universe had a cruel sense of irony. Kaia slumped against the wall, her legs giving out, pulling as many pups as she could into her arms. If they were going to die, at least they wouldn't die alone. At least someone would be with them at the end. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her soot-covered face. "I'm so sorry. I tried, I swear I tried." Shadow licked her face weakly, his tongue dry and rough. Ember pressed against her chest, her heartbeat rapid and irregular. And something inside Kaia didn't just break, it shattered. Every wall she'd ever built, every defense she'd ever constructed, every barrier between herself and the world, gone. And in the space where those walls had been, power, raw, primal, absolute. He'd exploded through her body, not the controlled warmth from before, not the gentle silver light, but something fundamental and elemental. It felt like every cell in her body had become a star, like lightning was running through her veins, like she'd touched the core of creation itself. Silver light erupted from her skin, so bright it turned the smoke-filled den into blazing daylight. So intense that the shadows fled like living things, so powerful that the flames themselves seemed to recoil. The pups yelped, scrambling back from her, their eyes wide with awe and instinctive fear. Kaia stood, her entire body glowing like she'd swallowed the moon, and she pushed. Not with her hands, with her will, with the absolute certainty that nothing, not fire, not death, not fate itself, was going to take these pups from her. The beam across the doorway didn't just move, it exploded. Splinters flew in every direction as the massive timber shattered into 1,000 pieces, the burning fragments scattering across the compound like dying stars. The flames that had surrounded them bent away, creating a corridor of clear air as if an invisible force was holding them back. The smoke parted like a curtain being drawn. Kaia didn't understand what was happening. Didn't care. Didn't have time to question or doubt or wonder. She gathered the pups, all 14 of them, using her light like a shield, like a blanket, like a promise made manifest. The silver energy wrapped around them, protecting them from the heat, filtering the air they breathed, carrying them with a strength that had nothing to do with physical muscle. Then she walked through the fire. The flames parted around her like water around a stone. The smoke cleared where she stepped, creating a path of pure air. The falling debris diverted its course, repelled by the bubble of power surrounding her and the pups. And she emerged into the compound carrying 14 pups in her arms, bathed in silver luminescence that made her look like something out of myth, like a saint from an old painting, like a force of nature given human form. The fighting stopped, completely. Hunters lowered their weapons, staring in shock and something that looked like religious awe. Wolves froze mid-attack, their eyes wide. Every person in the compound, predator and prey, pack and enemy, turned to stare at the impossible sight before them. A woman wreathed in silver light, walking calmly out of an inferno that should have killed her 10 times over, carrying the future of Iron Ridge Pack in her arms like she was taking them for an evening stroll. Kaia didn't notice their stares, didn't register the shocked silence. She walked straight to Marin's medical building with single-minded purpose, her feet moving automatically while her conscious mind focused entirely on the small lives cradled in her light. She entered the building and set the pups down gently on the examination tables, one by one, checking each for injuries with hands that glowed with residual power. All alive, all breathing, some with burns, some with smoke inhalation, but all savable, all going to survive. Marin rushed forward, her healer's instincts overriding her shock. She began treating the pups immediately, her hands moving with practiced efficiency even as her eyes kept darting to Kaia in disbelief. Kaia's light flickered, dimmed, and went out like a candle in the wind. She swayed on her feet, the world tilting sickeningly, and collapsed. This time, consciousness didn't return quickly. This time, the darkness that claimed her was absolute. When Kaia woke, the first thing she noticed was silence. No gunfire, no explosions, No screams of pain or howls of fury. Just quiet. Peaceful. Almost unsettling quiet. She was in a bed. Her bed. In the room they'd given her when this had all started. Afternoon light streamed through the barred window, painting golden rectangles on the wooden floor. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers. How long had she been unconscious? The door opened quietly. Marin entered, carrying a wooden tray laden with food, broth, bread, cheese, fruit. When she saw Kaia was awake, relief flooded her face so completely that it transformed her usually stern features into something almost maternal. "Easy," Marin said, setting the tray down on the bedside table and helping Kaia sit up with gentle hands. "You've been out for 18 hours. Your body needed to recover from what you put it through. I've never seen anyone burn through that much energy and survive." "The pups," Kaia croaked, her throat feeling like she'd swallowed broken glass. "All alive, all healthy. You saved every single one of them." Marin poured water from a pitcher, the liquid crystal clear, and handed Kaia the cup with both hands. "You saved a lot more than just them, actually." Kaia drank greedily, the cool water soothing her burned throat like a blessing. When she'd emptied the cup, Marin refilled it immediately. "The hunters?" Kaia asked after the second cup. "Gone." Marin's expression was complicated, relief mixed with something darker. "After you walked out of that fire like something out of a legend, like a spirit made flesh. They broke. Completely. Most of them fled immediately, dropping their weapons and running. The ones who didn't..." She paused, her jaw tightening. Darian dealt with them. He wasn't in a forgiving mood. Kaia didn't ask for details. Didn't want to know. "The pack?" Marin's expression softened with grief. "We lost 3 wolves. Marcus, who was 62 and had lived here his entire life. Sheila, who was pregnant with her first litter. And young Thomas, who was only 17 and had just completed his first shift 2 months ago." Her voice caught slightly. "But it could have been dozens, Kaia. Should have been dozens, given the hunters' firepower and planning. You turned the tide. If you hadn't stopped those hunters at the beginning with that emotional attack, if you hadn't saved the pups, if you hadn't shown everyone, pack and enemy alike, what you truly are." She shook her head slowly. "We'd be burying half the pack right now. Maybe more." The door opened again. Corvin stepped in, followed by Darian. Both men looked exhausted but whole. There were bandages on Darian's arms, fresh scratches healing on his face, but his eyes were clear, focused, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're awake," he said simply, his voice rougher than usual. "Apparently," Kaia replied, her own voice still hoarse. Awkward silence filled the room, the kind of silence that comes when there are too many words to say and no idea where to start. Then Corvin smiled, the first genuine, unguarded smile Kaia had seen from him since she'd arrived. It transformed his face, making him look years younger. "The other packs want to speak with you," he said, something like pride coloring his tone. Kaia blinked, confused. "What? Why? I thought they left." "They came back," Corvin said, "because half of them saw you walk through fire carrying 14 pups like you were taking a stroll through a meadow, and the other half heard about it within the hour and didn't believe it until their scouts confirmed it was true." "Word's spreading, Kaia. Fast. By tomorrow, every pack in the Northern Territories will know what happened here. What you did. What you are." Darian moved closer, his expression unreadable but his posture less rigid than before. "They're calling you the Omega of Iron Ridge, officially. The tribunal's been suspended indefinitely. The territory question's been withdrawn. As far as the council is concerned..." He paused, something flickering in his eyes that might have been relief or wonder or both. "You proved everything they needed to see. Everything we needed to prove." Kaia stared at him, her mind struggling to process the words. "I don't understand. I just did what needed to be done. What anyone would have done." "No," Darian said firmly, shaking his head. "What you did was impossible. No one has manifested that level of Omega power in 3 generations. No one has created a shield of pure energy. No one has commanded fire itself to obey them. You didn't just save those pups, Kaia. You announced to every pack, every alpha, every wolf in this region that Iron Ridge is not broken. that we have an Omega more powerful than any of them could have imagined. I didn't, Kaia started. You did, Darian interrupted gently. Whether you meant to or not, come on. If you can stand, they're waiting, and we shouldn't make 3 alphas wait too long. With Marin's help and Corvin's steady arm, Kaia got to her feet. Her body ached in ways she didn't have names for, but it was manageable. Everything still worked, even if it protested. She followed Darian and Corvin outside, Marin trailing behind with a healer's watchful eye. The compound had been transformed. The fires were completely out, leaving only charred timber and scorched earth as evidence of the battle. Debris had been cleared into neat piles. The dead had been removed for preparation of burial rites. And in the central clearing, hundreds of wolves had gathered, far more than had been there before. Not just Iron Ridge. All 3 of the other packs were there. Their numbers swelled by curious wolves who'd traveled to see the Omega who'd walked through fire. The blonde Alpha stood with her lieutenants, the scarred Alpha with his enforcers, the strategist with his advisors. Their wolves, hundreds of them, all watching the medical building's entrance with anticipation, all of them waiting for her. Kaia's heart hammered against her ribs. Darian led her to the center of the clearing, his presence beside her steady and grounding. The blonde Alpha stepped forward first, her ice-blue eyes no longer cold and assessing. They held something Kaia hadn't seen there before. Respect. Kaia Thornridge, she said formally, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. I am Lyrian Frostborn, Alpha of the Northern Ridge Pack. I came here 3 days ago to judge whether Iron Ridge deserved to survive, to determine whether this pack still had the strength and cohesion to hold its territory. She paused, and a small smile touched her lips. You've answered that question definitively. Your actions during the gauntlet demonstrated your abilities. Your actions during the attack demonstrated your courage. And your actions in that fire, she gestured toward the burned remains of the northern den, demonstrated power that none of us have seen in our lifetimes. Iron Ridge will retain its territory and its autonomy. You have my word and my pack's support should you ever need it. The gathered wolves murmured their agreement, a sound like wind through trees. The scarred Alpha stepped forward next, his massive frame somehow less intimidating than before. Victor Ashclaw, Alpha of the Broken Spine Pack. I've seen a lot of Omegas in my 63 years, trained with them, fought beside them, mourned them when they fell. He paused, his scarred face softening slightly. None of them could have done what you did last night. You have my respect, my admiration, and my pack's unconditional support. If Iron Ridge ever faces threat again, you call on us. We'll come. More murmurs of agreement. The strategist was last, and when he stepped forward, there was something that looked almost like amusement in his sharp eyes. Jaren Silverpaw, Alpha of the Eastern Vale Pack. I won't lie to you. I thought you were a fraud. A desperate attempt by a dying pack to save face with parlor tricks and borrowed power. His smile widened. I've never been happier to be completely wrong. You're the real thing, Kaia Thornridge, the genuine article, a true Omega with power we haven't seen since the old stories. And if you ever need allies, advisors, or simply someone to trade resources with, you have them. My pack stands with Iron Ridge. The gathered wolves howled their approval, the sound rising into the afternoon sky like a prayer. Kaia stood frozen, overwhelmed, not knowing what to say or how to respond to this sudden acceptance from people who'd been ready to dismantle her new pack just days ago. Darian spoke for her, his alpha voice carrying authority and gratitude in equal measure. Iron Ridge thanks you for your judgment and your support. We stand stronger tonight because of your presence and your witness to what transpired here. May our packs remain allies and friends in the years to come. The Alphas nodded formally and began to withdraw, their packs following in orderly processions. But many of the gathered wolves didn't disperse immediately. They lingered at the edges of the clearing, watching Kaia with expressions ranging from curiosity to awe to something that looked almost like reverence. Waiting. Corvin leaned close and whispered, "They want to see it. The light." It's traditional after a new Omega is formally recognized by the Council, a demonstration of the bond. "I don't know if I can," Kaia whispered back, anxiety tightening her chest. "I'm still so drained. I might not have anything left." "Try," Corvin urged gently, his hand supportive on her shoulder. Just try. Whatever you can manage will be enough. Kaia closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and reached for her center. For that warmth that had saved her, saved the pups, saved the pack, when everything seemed lost. And found. Not the emptiness she expected, not the dry wells she'd feared, but something new, something that hadn't been there before. A reservoir, deep and vast and powerful, fed by invisible streams. And Kaia understood with sudden, crystalline clarity. It was the bonds she'd forged. Every connection she'd created, every moment of trust and sacrifice and protection, every life she'd touched and saved. They were all feeding this well, strengthening it, making it deeper and more powerful than anything she could have built alone. The light came easily this time. It didn't feel like effort. It felt like breathing. Silver luminescence poured from her like sunlight breaking through storm clouds after weeks of rain, washing over the clearing in gentle waves that touched every wolf present. Those it touched felt it, a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. The bond, the connection, the promise of protection and belonging and family that transcended blood and biology. The gathered wolves howled in unison, not in aggression or challenge, in acknowledgement, in acceptance, in joy. Kaia was no longer the outsider, no longer the questioned stranger, no longer the prisoner kept for uncertain purposes. She was the Omega of Iron Ridge, and the pack that had questioned her, doubted her, locked her in a room and tested her to the breaking point, now bowed to her with respect and gratitude. When the light faded naturally gently, Kaia swayed on her feet. Darian caught her immediately, his hand steady and warm on her arm, his presence grounding. "Easy," he murmured, his voice low and meant only for her. "You've done more than enough for one day, more than anyone had the right to ask of you." Kaia looked up at him, searching his face. Did we really just survive this? Is it really over? Something that might have been a smile, a real one, unguarded and genuine, touched Darian's lips for the first time since she'd met him. "We did, thanks to you. Thanks to your courage, and your power, and your stubborn refusal to give up even when any sane person would have run." "I didn't do it alone," Kaia protested weakly. "No," Darian agreed, his golden eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "But you did what no one else could. You gave us hope when we had none left. You gave us a reason to fight when we were ready to surrender to the inevitable. You showed us that Iron Ridge wasn't dead, just waiting for the right person to breathe life back into it." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "You saved us, Kaia Thornridge. Whether you fully understand that yet or not, you saved every life in this compound, and we won't forget it." The other alphas were leaving now, their packs filing out of the compound in orderly processions, their heads high with the satisfaction of witnessing something extraordinary. But Iron Ridge wolves remained surrounding Kaia, not threateningly, not questioningly, but protectively, welcoming her fully into their circle for the first time, accepting her not as an outsider or a tool or a last desperate hope, but as one of them, as family. Frost, Shadow, and Ember appeared, weaving through the crowd of legs to reach her. They pressed against her legs, tails wagging furiously, eyes bright with affection and trust. Kaia knelt slowly, careful of her exhausted body, and gathered them close. "We did it," she whispered against their soft fur. "We actually did it. We're all still here." Shadow licked her face enthusiastically, his whole body wiggling with joy. Ember nuzzled her hand with quiet contentment. Frost climbed into her lap and promptly fell asleep, secure in the knowledge that she was safe. And Kaia, who'd spent most of her life alone, isolated by choice and circumstance, convinced she didn't need anyone and that no one needed her, realized with overwhelming clarity that she'd found exactly what she'd been missing without even knowing she'd been searching for it. A pack, a family, a home, a purpose bigger than simple survival. Even if she still didn't fully understand all the implications of what she was, even if the magnitude of her power still frightened her, even if the responsibilities ahead seemed impossibly heavy, she would learn, she would grow, she would become whatever Iron Ridge needed her to be, because they'd given her something precious in return. They'd given her belonging, and that, Kaia was beginning to understand, was worth fighting for, worth dying for, if it came to that. But today she wouldn't have to die. Today, they'd all survived. and tomorrow would take care of itself. The days that followed the attack blurred together in a haze of rebuilding and recovery. Iron Ridge Pack worked tirelessly to repair the damage, clearing burned timber, salvaging what could be saved, rebuilding what couldn't. The northern den was completely destroyed, so they constructed a new one closer to the center of the compound, larger and safer. The armory was rebuilt with reinforced walls. New defenses were erected around the perimeter. But the physical reconstruction was only part of the healing. Kaia spent those days moving through the compound like a quiet storm, touching lives wherever she went. She sat with Marin in the medical building, learning to channel her healing abilities with precision rather than desperation. She helped Corvin organize supply runs and coordinate with neighboring packs. She trained with the younger wolves, teaching them to trust their instincts while controlling their aggression. And everywhere she went, the pups followed. Frost, Shadow, and Ember had become her constant companions, along with the other 11 she'd saved from the fire. They trailed behind her like a small army, their eyes bright with devotion, their tails wagging whenever she glanced their way. The pack's attitude toward her had shifted completely. Where there had been suspicion, there was now respect. Where there had been hostility, there was now gratitude. Wolves who'd avoided her before now sought her out, asking questions, sharing stories, inviting her to meals. But Kaia could feel the undercurrent of tension that still ran through the compound. They were waiting for something. She just didn't know what. On the 5th day after the attack, Corvin found her in the training yard, watching Shadow and Ember wrestle playfully while Frost dozed in a patch of sunlight. "Darian wants to see you," Corvin said, his expression carefully neutral. "In the Great Hall. There are visitors." Kaia's stomach tightened. "What kind of visitors?" "The kind that will determine Iron Ridge's future," Corvin replied cryptically. "Come on, don't keep them waiting." She followed him through the compound, her mind racing. The 3 alphas had left days ago. Who else would be coming? And why did Corvin look so tense? When they entered the Great Hall, Kaia stopped short. The room was packed, not just with Iron Ridge wolves, but with strangers. Dozens of them, men and women in formal clothing, their postures rigid with authority. They stood in small clusters, talking in low voices, their eyes sharp and assessing. At the head of the long table, Darian stood with his arms crossed, his face carved from stone. When he saw Kaia, something flickered in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or apology. "Kaia," he said formally. "Thank you for coming. Allow me to introduce the Regional Council of Pack Alphas." The room fell silent. An elderly woman stepped forward, leaning heavily on a carved walking stick. Her hair was pure white, her face lined with age, but her eyes were sharp as broken glass. When she spoke, her voice carried absolute authority. "Kaia Thornridge," the woman said. "I am Elder Marissa Blackwood, Chair of the Regional Council. We've traveled from across the Northern Territories to meet you, to assess whether the reports of your abilities are accurate." Kaia's pulse quickened. "Reports?" "Word spreads fast in our world," Marissa said, a thin smile touching her lips. "When an Omega appears, especially one displaying power we haven't seen in generations, the Council takes notice. We've heard remarkable things about you, walking through fire, creating shields of pure energy, calming hostile wolves with a touch, healing the dying." She paused, her gaze penetrating. "We've also heard you have no training, no understanding of our laws or traditions, no formal connection to any established pack lineage beyond a bloodline we thought extinct." "That's all true," Kaia said carefully, sensing the trap in the words. "Which presents a problem," another council member interjected, a middle-aged man with cold eyes. "Omegas are incredibly powerful, incredibly rare, and incredibly dangerous if they don't understand how to control what they are. History is full of Omegas who lost control, who bonded entire packs to themselves so completely that the wolves lost all autonomy, who used their abilities to manipulate, to dominate, to destroy." Kaia's hands clenched into fists. "I would never—" "You say that now," the man interrupted, "but you don't know what you're capable of. You've had this power for less than a week. You haven't been tested, haven't been trained, haven't learned the boundaries that keep Omegas from becoming tyrants." Darian moved forward, his voice hard. "Kaia saved this pack. She put herself at risk repeatedly." "We're not disputing that," Marissa said, raising a hand. But the Council has protocols for newly emerged Omegas, protocols designed to protect both the Omega and the packs they serve. Kaia needs training, guidance, structure, the kind of education that can only be provided at the Omega Academy in the Eastern Territories. Kaia's blood ran cold. You want to send me away? We want to ensure you reach your full potential without causing harm, Marissa said. The Academy has trained every Omega in the northern regions for the last century. It's a 6-month program covering emotional control, bond management, healing techniques, pack dynamics, and legal frameworks. You would return to Iron Ridge fully prepared to serve as their Omega. 6 months? Kaia's voice was tight. You want me to leave for 6 months when this pack is barely holding together? The pack will survive 6 months, the cold-eyed man said dismissively. They survived 3 weeks without an Omega. They can survive a bit longer while you receive proper training. No. The word came from Darian, sharp and final. Absolutely not. Kaia stays here. We'll train her ourselves. With what expertise? Marissa challenged. Your last Omega died before she could pass on her knowledge. You have no one qualified to teach her. Without proper training, she's a liability. To herself and to you. She saved 14 pups from fire, Corvin interjected, his voice tight with anger. She stopped a hunter attack. She passed the gauntlet on her first try with no preparation. She's not a liability. She's extraordinary. Extraordinary and untrained is how disasters happen, another council member said firmly. The argument escalated, voices rising, tensions mounting. Kaia stood in the center of it all, feeling like a piece of property being negotiated over. They were talking about her, around her, but not to her, making decisions about her life without asking what she wanted. The familiar sensation of powerlessness washed over her, the same feeling she'd had her entire life. Being alone, being overlooked, being acted upon rather than acting. But she wasn't that person anymore. She'd walked through fire. She'd saved lives. She'd proven she was more than just a survivor. Enough, Kaia said quietly. No one heard her over the arguing. Enough! Kaia shouted, and silver light exploded from her body in a wave that silenced every voice in the room. The council members stumbled back, shock written across their faces. Kaia stood at the center of the light, her hands glowing, her eyes burning with determination. I appreciate your concern, she said, her voice steady and clear. But I'm not going anywhere. I didn't ask to be an Omega. I didn't ask for this power. But I have it now, and I'm going to use it the way I see fit. Not the way the council dictates, not the way tradition demands, the way that serves the people who need me. You don't understand what you're risking, Marissa said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. Without training, without boundaries. I understand perfectly, Kaia interrupted. You're afraid I'll become what you can't control, that I'll bond this pack so deeply they won't answer to your authority anymore. That I'll upset the careful balance of power you've maintained for generations. She let the light fade slightly. But I'm not interested in control. I'm interested in survival, in family, in giving these wolves what they deserve, a chance to heal and rebuild without council interference. This is highly irregular, the cold-eyed man sputtered. So is surviving an attack by 20 armed hunters, Kaia shot back. So is walking through fire. So is being the first Thornridge Omega in 30 years. I think we're past the point of regular. Marissa studied her for a long moment, something that might have been respect flickering in her ancient eyes. You're refusing the academy? She asked carefully. I'm choosing my pack, Kaia replied. If that means refusing the academy, then yes. Then the council cannot formally recognize you as Iron Ridge's Omega, Marissa said. Without academy certification, you have no official standing, no legal protection, no guarantee that other packs will respect your position. I don't need official standing, Kaia said firmly. The wolves of Iron Ridge know what I am. The 3 alphas who witnessed the gauntlet know what I am. That's enough for me. Silence filled the hall. Then Darian stepped forward, standing beside Kaia. Iron Ridge recognizes Kaia Thornridge as our Omega, he said formally, his voice carrying absolute authority. With or without council approval, she has earned that position through courage, sacrifice, and power. We stand with her decision. Corvin moved to Kaia's other side. As do I. Then Marin stepped forward. And I. One by one, the wolves of Iron Ridge moved forward, forming a wall of bodies between Kaia and the council. Young and old, fighters and healers, parents and children, united, standing with her, choosing her. Marissa looked at the assembled pack, then back at Kaia, and sighed deeply. "Very well," she said. "The council will not force the issue. But understand this, Kaia Thornridge, you're walking a dangerous path. Without training, without guidance, the risk of losing control increases exponentially. If you harm anyone, if your abilities spiral out of control, the council will intervene. And we won't be gentle." "I understand," Kaia said. "I hope you do." Marissa turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think you might be exactly what the packs need. Someone who doesn't follow the old rules. Someone who forges their own path. But be careful. The old rules exist for a reason. Breaking them has consequences." The council members filed out, their expressions ranging from disapproval to grudging respect. When the last of them had gone, the tension in the room broke like a snapped wire. The Iron Ridge wolves surrounded Kaia, touching her arms, her shoulders, expressing gratitude and solidarity in a dozen small gestures. Darian waited until the crowd had dispersed before speaking. "That was reckless," he said, but there was no heat in the words. "Probably," Kaia agreed, "but it was also necessary. I can't be what this pack needs if I'm halfway across the territories learning to be what the council thinks I should be." "They'll watch you now," Corvin warned, "waiting for you to make a mistake." "Then I won't make one," Kaia said with more confidence than she felt. Darian studied her face, something shifting in his expression. "You've changed. In less than a week, you've transformed from a terrified woman who didn't understand what was happening to an Omega who just defied the regional council without flinching." "I'm still terrified," Kaia admitted, "but I've learned something important. Fear doesn't have to stop you. It can drive you forward if you let it." But 2 weeks later, Kaia stood at the northern edge of the compound, watching the sun set over the mountains. The sky burned orange and gold, painting the snow-capped peaks in fire. Frost sat at her feet, now noticeably larger and stronger. Shadow and Ember wrestled nearby, their playful growls carrying on the evening air. She heard footsteps behind her. Darian. He'd been keeping his distance since the council's visit, giving her space to settle into her new role. But tonight, he walked right up to her and stood looking out at the same view. "Beautiful," he said quietly. "It is," Kaia agreed. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken words. "I owe you an apology," Darian said finally. "When you first arrived, I treated you like a threat, locked you in a room, questioned your motives, forced you into the gauntlet when you barely understood what you were." "You were protecting your pack," Kaia said. "I understand that now." "I was drowning," Darian corrected, his voice rough. "And when you showed up, I grabbed on without caring if I pulled you under with me. That wasn't protection. That was desperation." Kaia looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, saw the exhaustion in his face, the grief he carried, the weight of leadership that had nearly crushed him. "You lost your sister," she said softly. "Your Omega, your family. And suddenly you were responsible for keeping everyone else alive when you could barely keep yourself together. Anyone would have been desperate." Darian's jaw clenched. "Elena would have loved you. She would have seen what you were immediately, welcomed you without question. She was better at this than I'll ever be." "You're doing fine," Kaia said. "The pack is still here, still fighting. That's because of your leadership." "No," Darian said, turning to face her fully. "That's because of you. You gave us hope when we had none. You showed us that strength isn't just dominance and aggression. That an Omega isn't just someone who heals wounds. They heal hearts, heal spirits, heal the bonds that hold a pack together." He paused, his golden eyes intense. "You saved us, Kaia, not just from the hunters, from ourselves, from the despair that was eating us alive." Kaia's throat tightened. "I just did what felt right." "And that's why you're perfect for this," Darian said. "Because you don't overthink it. Don't calculate the politics or worry about the rules. You just act. Follow your instincts. Trust yourself." He smiled slightly, "even when it means defying the regional council and risking everything." "Was that stupid?" Kaia asked. "Incredibly," Darian said. "Also brave." And exactly what we needed to see. That you're committed to this pack, to us, not to some abstract idea of what an Omega should be. Movement caught Kaia's eye. Below, in the compound, wolves were gathering for the evening meal, families coming together, children playing, normalcy slowly returning after weeks of chaos. I never had this, Kaia said quietly. Growing up, it was just me and my grandmother. I thought I was fine alone, that I didn't need people. But watching them, she gestured to the scene below. I realized I was just surviving, not living. There's a difference. There is, Darian agreed, and you're giving that difference to all of them, showing them what it means to be part of something bigger than yourself. Frost stood and patted over to Darian, sniffing his hand curiously. After a moment, she licked his fingers and wagged her tail. Darian's expression softened completely. He knelt and scratched behind Frost's ears, and the pup leaned into his touch with obvious pleasure. She's Elena's daughter, Darian said, his voice thick. When I found her body, when I thought the pups were dead too, I thought I'd lost everything that remained of my sister. But you brought them back, kept them alive when all logic said they should have died. I'll never be able to repay that debt. There's no debt, Kaia said firmly. They needed someone. I was there, that's all. It's not all, Darian said, standing. But I'm learning that you don't accept gratitude easily. So I'll just say this, Iron Ridge is your home now. For as long as you want it, you're not a guest, not a temporary solution. You're pack, family, and we protect our own. Something warm bloomed in Kaia's chest. Belonging, acceptance, family, everything she'd never known she was missing. Thank you, she whispered. Darian nodded and turned to leave. Darian, Kaia called. He stopped. What happens now? With the council watching us, with other packs knowing what I can do, what comes next? Darian was quiet for a moment, considering. Now? He said finally. Now we rebuild. We train. We strengthen our bonds. We prepare for whatever challenges come next. Because they will come. The council won't forget your defiance, and there are always threats in this world. Hunters, rival packs, natural disasters. The list never ends. He paused. But we face them together. Alpha and Omega, pack and family, the way it's meant to be. Together, Kaia repeated, liking the sound of the word. Darian smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine, and walked back toward the compound. Kaia stayed a moment longer, watching the last light fade from the sky. The mountains looked different now. Not hostile, not isolating, but protective, sheltering, home. She thought about the woman she'd been 2 weeks ago, alone in a cabin, surviving day to day, content with isolation because it was safe. That woman was gone. In her place was someone new, someone stronger, someone who'd walked through fire and emerged transformed, an Omega. Kaia Thornridge, Omega of Iron Ridge Pack. It still felt surreal, but it also felt right. 3 months later, Kaia stood in the reconstructed Great Hall, watching as Iron Ridge celebrated the winter solstice, a tradition that had nearly died with Elena but was being revived under Kaia's influence. The hall was packed with wolves in both forms, the air filled with laughter and music, and the smell of roasting meat. Children ran between tables, playing elaborate games. Adults traded stories and shared meals. The pups, now significantly larger and more rambunctious, caused cheerful chaos wherever they went. Kaia moved through the celebration, touching lives with casual gestures. A hand on a shoulder here, healing a minor injury there, mediating a small dispute with gentle words. The bonds she'd forged had deepened over the months, becoming as natural as breathing. She'd learned to control her abilities with Marin's patient teaching and Corvin's tactical guidance, learned to project calm without overwhelming, to heal without draining herself completely, to sense emotional undercurrents before they became conflicts. She'd also learned the pack's history, their traditions, their hopes and fears, learned each wolf's name and story, learned to be not just an Omega, but their Omega. And they'd learned to trust her completely. Near the fireplace, Marissa Blackwood sat in a place of honor. A surprise visitor who'd arrived that morning with a small escort. Kaia approached cautiously. Elder Blackwood, I didn't expect to see you again. Marissa smiled, the expression softening her stern features. I told you the council would be watching. I decided to watch personally rather than rely on reports. She gestured for Kaia to sit beside her. You've done remarkable work here. The pack is stronger than it's been in years. The bonds are deep and healthy. The territory is secure. And you, she studied Kaia with those sharp eyes. Boss, you've grown into your power beautifully. I've had good teachers, Kaia said, glancing at Marin across the room. The best teacher is experience, Marissa said, and you've had plenty of that. Walking your own path rather than the Academy's prepared curriculum, it's produced something unique. An Omega who understands pack dynamics through lived experience rather than theoretical study. Who leads through earned respect rather than formal authority. She paused. The council is prepared to offer formal recognition, if you want it. Kaia blinked. You're serious? Completely. Your methods are unconventional, but the results speak for themselves. Iron Ridge is thriving. Other packs are requesting consultations with you. Young Omegas are citing you as inspiration to forge their own paths. Marissa's smile widened. You've become something of a legend, Kaia Thornridge. The Omega who defied the council and proved them wrong. I didn't do it to prove anyone wrong, Kaia said. I did it because it was right for my pack. I know. That's exactly why we're offering recognition now. Because you've demonstrated that you understand what being an Omega truly means. It's not about following rules or maintaining traditions. It's about serving your pack with everything you have. You've done that. You've earned recognition through action, not certification. Kaia considered this. Formal recognition would mean legal protection, official standing, guaranteed respect from other packs. It would make her position unassailable, but it would also mean accepting council oversight, playing by their rules, at least to some degree. What are the conditions? She asked carefully. No conditions, Marissa said. Just a request. Share your experiences with young Omegas. Mentor those who feel constrained by traditional training. Show them there are multiple paths to excellence. Help us evolve rather than fighting us. That I can do, Kaia said, relief washing through her. Then consider yourself formally recognized as Omega of Iron Ridge Pack, with all rights and protections that entails. Marissa stood, leaning on her walking stick. Welcome to the official ranks, Kaia. I have a feeling you're going to change a lot of minds about what Omegas can be. They formalized the recognition with a simple ceremony, Marissa presenting Kaia with a silver medallion bearing the council's seal, officially recording her in the pack registries, making brief remarks about her extraordinary service. The Iron Ridge wolves howled their approval, the sound shaking the rafters. And Kaia felt the shift, the invisible weight of legitimacy settling onto her shoulders. Not heavy, just present, real. She was official now, recognized, accepted not just by her pack, but by the broader wolf community. After the ceremony, Darian found her on the same northern overlook where they'd talked months ago. How does it feel? He asked. Being officially official? Kaia laughed. Honestly, not that different. The pack already accepted me. The medallion doesn't change that. It changes how other packs see you, Darian said. It means they can't dismiss you as an untrained anomaly anymore. It means when you speak with authority that extends beyond Iron Ridge. Is that a good thing? It's a powerful thing, Darian corrected. Whether it's good depends on how you use it. Kaia touched the medallion hanging around her neck. The metal was warm from her body heat, the seal clear and precise, proof of who she'd become. I still can't believe this is my life now, she said softly. 6 months ago, I was alone in a cabin. No family, no purpose beyond surviving each day. Now I have a pack of 70 wolves who depend on me, pups who follow me everywhere. Responsibilities that terrify and energize me in equal measure. It's overwhelming. But you wouldn't trade it, Darian said. It wasn't a question. No, Kaia admitted, smiling. I wouldn't. She gestured to the compound below, to the celebration continuing in the great hall, to the mountains sheltering them all. This is everything I never knew I wanted, everything I was missing without realizing it. Below, Frost led a pack of younger pups in some elaborate game that involved a lot of running and playful pouncing. She'd grown into a beautiful young wolf, strong, confident, with her mother's grace and her own fierce determination. Shadow and Ember were there too, slightly larger, equally devoted to Kaia, but carving out their own identities within the pack hierarchy. All three were alive because Kaia had refused to let them die. And Iron Ridge was alive because Kaia had refused to let them fall. You know, Darian said quietly, Elena used to tell me that an Omega's greatest power isn't healing or calming or even bonding, it's hope. The ability to make others believe in possibility even when everything seems impossible. Sounds wise, Kaia said. She is. Her memory still guides us. Darian paused. But you've given us something she couldn't in her final weeks. You've given us a future, a reason to believe that Iron Ridge will be here for generations to come, that the losses we've suffered don't have to define us, that we can rebuild stronger than before. We, Kaia emphasized. You keep saying you gave us this, but it's been we, from the moment you stopped seeing me as a threat and started seeing me as pack, alpha, and omega, together. That's what made the difference. Darian turned to face her fully, his golden eyes intense in the twilight. Then let's make it official. Kaia's breath caught. What do you mean? I mean a formal alpha-omega bond, the kind that ties pack leadership together permanently. That announces to every pack in the territory that Iron Ridge is united at its core, that we're not just surviving, we're thriving. He paused. If you want that, if you're ready for that level of commitment. The Alpha-Omega bond. Kaia had learned about it from Marin, a deep, permanent connection that linked the pack's two primary leaders, allowing them to sense each other's emotions, share strength in crisis, coordinate the pack's energy with unprecedented precision. It was intimate, binding, forever. It was also exactly what Iron Ridge needed to cement their stability. And if Kaia was honest with herself, it was what she wanted too. Yes, she said simply. I'm ready. Darian's expression shifted into something that might have been relief or joy or both. Then we'll perform the bonding ritual at the next full moon, in front of the pack and any witnesses who wish to attend. Make it clear that Iron Ridge has both an alpha and an omega fully committed to its future. Together, Kaia said, echoing the word from months ago. Together, Darian agreed. They stood in comfortable silence as full darkness fell, the lights from the compound below creating a warm glow against the night. Kaia thought about the journey that had brought her here, finding dying pups in a blizzard, walking into a compound full of suspicious strangers, healing frost without understanding how, passing the gauntlet through pure instinct, walking through fire to save 14 lives, defying the council to stay with her pack. Every choice had been terrifying. Every choice had been necessary. Every choice had led her here, to this moment, this place, this family. She'd spent her whole life believing she was meant to be alone. She'd been wrong. She was meant to be exactly here. Omega of Iron Ridge, heart of the pack, bridge between the individual and the collective, protector of the innocent, champion of the broken. Hope made manifest. And as she stood on that overlook with Darian beside her, the pack celebrating below, the mountains standing sentinel around them, and the stars emerging one by one in the vast Montana sky, Kaia Thornridge understood something profound. She'd finally come home, not to a place, but to a purpose, to a family, to herself. And nothing, not hunters, not councils, not tradition, not fear, would ever take that away from her again, because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. Strength isn't just surviving, it's choosing to fight for something bigger than yourself, choosing connection over isolation, choosing love over safety, choosing to become who you were always meant to be, even when the path terrifies you, especially then. The pups howled below, young voices full of joy and promise, and Kaia howled with them, her voice joining theirs in perfect harmony. The sound echoed across the mountains, a declaration, a promise, a beginning. Iron Ridge had fallen and risen again, and at its heart stood an Omega who'd walked through fire to save them, not because she had to, but because she chose to. And that choice had changed everything.